What is going on, guys? In this video, I'm going to be showing you how to create an Aurora RDS serverless instance using MySQL or Postgres and combine that with a Lambda function that is used to query that RDS serverless instance. So this entire thing is going to be serverless. There's going to be no database instances or compute instances involved. So it's going to be very, very cost effective for those of you that are looking to build applications that aren't going to break the bank and are also going to be able to scale up and down in response to high or low throughput. So that's what we have in store today. So the first thing that we're going to do is go ahead and create our RDS instance. So if you're new to the console, go ahead to the top here in the search bar and type in RDS. It's going to bring up RDS Managed Relational Database Service. You're going to go ahead and click on this guy, and it should bring us to the RDS console page. And this is the default view here, and sticking out is this Amazon Aurora Create Database option, and that's what we're going to be using in this example. So let's go ahead and click on that and follow the wizard here in order to create our serverless instance. So first things first, it's asking us to choose a database creation method. It's defaulting to standard create. Keep in mind that you want to use standard create in this walkthrough, because if you select easy create, then a bunch of the more advanced options go away, which includes the option to create a serverless database. So make sure you do not have easy create selected and that you do have standard create selected. So the second option here is in terms of engine. So it's asking us which engine we want to use. So we want to use Amazon Aurora because that is the only engine that supports the serverless option. Now keep in mind that you have access to two different editions here, either the MySQL edition or the Postgres edition. So this means that if you're used to using either MySQL dialect or Postgres, both are going to be options for you. You just have to pick which one is right for you. Now keep in mind, if you want to use the Postgres engine itself or the MySQL engine explicitly and not Aurora, you certainly can, but you won't have an option to use the serverless functionality. So since we want to do that in this demo, we want to go ahead and use Aurora. So we do not want to use provisioned here. Provisioned is the traditional model where we have a provisioned instance. Instead, we want to go ahead and click on serverless. And from there, we want to specify the version of MySQL. So by default, it's giving us 5.6. You also have some other options here for 5.7. I'm just going to leave this on the default for now and close this window, and then we'll go from there. So scrolling down a little bit more, DB cluster identifier, pick a name that's suitable for your kind of project. So I'm just going to call this Aurora. Actually, I don't think it allows you to put underscores or anything. So Aurora Serverless Demo. And for master username, we're going to leave it as admin. We're going to set the password to admin123, admin123. Now, I do want to point out here that despite us setting the credentials for our administrator account, we are going to be doing this or interacting with this database not through the traditional way that uses the database connection URL string. Instead, we're going to be using the data API. And the data API allows you to perform HTTP queries against your database as opposed to having to form a database connection to your database. This is a really cool thing because it lets AWS worry about connection pool management, which if you're not using serverless, typically that's a thing that you have to worry about. Now, by using the data plane API, it makes it very convenient, very easy to access your database, which is why I'm encouraging you to do this, especially combined with Lambda functions, which are in itself serverless as well. It's an especially good idea to use the data API. And there's going to be a specific setting, which I'm going to show you, which allows us to enable that data API. And I'll show you that in a few moments here. So scrolling down here to capacity settings, this is the section where we specify the minimum and the maximum Aurora capacity units or ACUs for our serverless instance. So the lower you set this thing, that's going to be the floor of where your serverless instance scales down to. And wherever you set the maximum, that's obviously going to be the ceiling of where the maximum it scales up to. I would just set this to something reasonable like 8 or something like that just to start out. I wouldn't kind of put this as the maximum setting because, you never know. Maybe someone will DDoS your application and make you query your database like crazy. Then you get some unexpected bill. You don't want that to happen. And even if you do, you want it to like brown out at 8 gigabytes. So just keep this as a reasonable number. You never know what's going to happen with your app. So don't go crazy with this. There's some additional settings that you can specify here. I went over this in a previous video. I'm not going to talk about it again. So you can play with these if you want. I'm not going to mess with them here. In terms of connectivity, most of you probably already know that a RDS is deployed into a VPC. A VPC is just a fancy word for a virtual cloud that is isolated from anyone else's AWS account. So you have to deploy your RDS into a VPC. Now, everyone has a default VPC when you create an account that has a bunch of kind of easy to get started settings. We're not going to mess with any of the settings here. We're just going to leave this as default. Now, I do want to point out though, this bottom option here, which is additional configuration. And this is the configuration to use the data API, which I was talking about earlier, which allows us to interact with our database using an HTTP endpoint as opposed to a database connection. So we are definitely going to tick this. And even if you don't want to do that, even if you want to use the database connection, I suggest you do tick it because it's going to allow you to use the query console in the AWS console, which is a quick and easy way to experiment with your database by running queries in the console itself against your database. So super handy, super convenient. Highly suggest you actually try this. But you're definitely going to want to set this because if you don't, the rest of the kind of demonstration isn't going to work when we get to the Lambda section. For additional configuration, the only thing that I want to mess with here is the initial database name. Let's just call this serverless demo. I don't think it allows underscores, by the way, so just keep that in mind. We're going to leave this on default Aurora, backup retention period. Everything here is default. The only thing I want to change is deletion protection because I want to clean this up later. So just to review really quick, I just want to double check the cluster identifier. Okay, so Aurora serverless demo is what we named that. And the database itself is called serverless demo. I'm just going to copy this to my clipboard so I don't forget for later because we're going to need that when we get to the query console. So go ahead and click on create database now. And this usually takes a couple minutes and I will fast forward when this changes from creating to available. So give me a few minutes here. All right, guys, so this finally changed to available status after 5 minutes or so. So let's check this thing out. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the database here. And then this thing gives you a bunch of different settings that you can take a look at, including the endpoint and the port. From here though, like you can check out these tabs in terms of what they all do. What we want to do is actually just run some queries against this database and see what we got. And we're going to create our table using the query editor here. So I clicked on query editor and it's asking us for the database instance or cluster. So we're just going to pick our database instance here, ask us for a username. We're going to use our database credentials. So we're going to use admin. If you recall the username and password that we inserted during the setup wizard, we're going to put the same username and password in here. So the username was admin and the password for me was admin123. And then from there, it's asking us the name of the database or schema. Our database is serverless demo, which is why I copied it to my clipboard in the previous step. And then from here, I'm just going to say connect to the database. And if all is well, yep, there we go. We get access to the UI here that lets us run some queries. So this is a super useful tool just to kind of test out a bunch of things without having to kind of set up MySQL Workbench or anything like that. So let's actually test this out. So we're going to go ahead and click on run here with just the default. And this is just going to give us some schema information. Pretty cool. Let's try something. Let's create our own table here. So I just have a query off to the side and we're just creating a table named customers with customer ID as an int and first name as a varchar. Going to go ahead and click on run. And we can see that was a success. The next thing that we want to do is just insert some data into this table. So we're just going to do insert into customers, customer ID first name, values 1 and John Doe. Go ahead and click on 1. You can add a whole bunch of rows here if you want to have more. You can see here that we have 1 row updated. And now we just want to do a very simple select just to ensure that our data is actually in this table. Go ahead and click on run again. And you can see here we're getting customer ID 1 and first name John Doe. Okay, perfect. So we have pretty much everything we need from the Aurora serverless perspective. The next step is to go ahead and create our Lambda function. So I'm just going to go ahead and duplicate this tab so that we get another one. And I'm going to go into Lambda now. So I'm just going to type in Lambda at the top and click on Lambda. And go ahead and click on create function in the top right. And from here, we get to specify some parameters of our function. So we just need to name it here. So let's just call this Aurora Lambda Serverless Demo. And we're going to be using Python 3.7 for this. The language doesn't really matter. It's going to be some very, very simple code, but it really doesn't matter. There's an SDK in which you can use these APIs that I'm about to show you regardless for any language. So for permissions, what we're going to do is we're going to fail intentionally here. I'm just going to use the default here. So to create a new role with basic Lambda permissions. And then I'm going to show you the point in which it fails when we try to actually query our database. And then I'm going to fix it by going to add the right permissions to our Lambda function. So we're just going to leave this as default now. And you don't have to touch advanced settings, leave that as default as well. And go ahead and click on create function. Another thing I wanted to point out while this is creating is that if you were using a traditional setup with just an RDS provisioned instance, if you wanted to use Lambda in conjunction with that, you would have to deploy the Lambda into the same VPC as the RDS instance. If you're using the data API, you don't have to do that, which is a major, major +1 to using the data API. So just keep that in mind. So we can see here that it succeeded. Our function was created successfully. And let's just take a quick look at what we got here. So we got our just dummy Lambda function here, which is doing nothing. So let's just get rid of this stuff. So we need to do a couple things here. We need to import some libraries, and we need to formulate a client and then actually like construct everything. So I'm going to do this all inline here in the editor. So let's say import Boto3. And then we're going to, like Boto3, by the way, is the library that you use to interact with AWS service endpoints. And we need a couple variables here. So we have database _ name. I'm just going to leave this as empty for now. We're going to go through all this stuff and fill it in as we go. We need to set the database cluster _ ARN. Again, we're going to leave that as default. And finally, we need to get the database credentials _ secrets store _ ARN. And the credentials that we are going to be using to access the data API are stored in a secret, and secrets are just kind of, secrets. I don't know how else to describe a secret, but it's a service that allows you to hide your credentials, kind of like environment variables and that kind of stuff. So we're going to go ahead and fill in all of this stuff. So what was our database name? And I want to kind of walk you through how you can do this. So I have two tabs open, so I'm going to be switching between them pretty often here. So let's get our database name. And if you recall, when we went into like the query editor, it asked us some things about like what was our database name. I think it was serverless demo, if I'm not mistaken. Actually, you know what? We can just go into databases. It's not this thing. It's not the database identifier. And it is actually in the configuration section. And where is it? There we go. DB name, serverless demo. So that's the first setting that we want. Going back over here and putting in the database name. Then it wants the database cluster ARN, again, going back to the other tab. The ARN is right here, also under the configuration page. Going to grab on this guy and go over here, paste this in. Now it's asking us for our DB credential secret store ARN. What's that? So I'm going to open a new tab again, and we are going to go to the secrets. Oops. I just typed something in here. Yep, let's undo that. And we're going to go to the secrets manager section. And that's going to give us we need to select the ARN for our RDS instance here. So the one that I created, which one is it now? Because I was messing with this. I think it's the second one because we named our cluster Aurora Serverless Demo. And over here, if I'm not mistaken, it's Aurora Serverless Demo. So this bottom one here is the secret name that we are interested in. If we click on this, we can just see some details about this secret. And if we want to see what's inside this secret or what is the value of this secret, we can see all these kind of hidden values that we didn't want to share, right? And that's why it's a good idea to use secrets. You can hide all of this information unless the person has the right role in order to kind of describe the secret or get the secret, so to speak. So you can see here that our password is actually being stored in here, which is in mid123. So I wasn't lying to you. That indeed was the password. You can specify some other details here, but the only thing that we really want out of this is the secret ARN, which is what I'm going to grab. Going to copy that to my clipboard, going back now, And I'm just going to paste that in here. And just go back to the beginning. Okay, so now we have everything that we need so far. So let's actually write the code in order to actually interact with our serverless endpoint. So what we're going to do is we're going to say response is equal to, and I'm going to execute a statement here. I'm going to call a function provided with some SQL, and in that function, we're going to actually do the connection. So just bear with me here. So we're going to say execute underscore statement. And we're going to just pass in our SQL as a string. So select star from serverless demo dot customers. Just a very simple select star. And then we can just return response actually. We don't need to do anything after that. And then let's define that execute statement function. We're going to say def executes underscore statement. And we're just going to take in a SQL. Actually, you know what I realized? We forgot to create an instance of our client. So let's go ahead to the top and actually do that because that's what we need to actually create the instance and interact with our RDS serverless endpoint. So we're going to say RDS underscore client is equal to bodo3.client, client, and it's just RDS dash data. And if you are interested in learning more about the RDS client and how this works, I'm going to leave this link to this webpage in the description section. It describes to you how all this stuff works and different settings and everything that go into this. So you can kind of read up on this. I'm just going to show you very simply how everything works here. So back to Lambda function. So we have our client now. Now we can actually copy in the function call using the Bodo3 client. Let me just paste this in here and get the indentation level right. So we are saying response is equal to RDS client.execute statement. And then we're providing it with our secret ARN, DB credentials, secret ARN, which is what we had up here. We're passing it our database name, which is, what we had up here, which is serverless demo, giving it the ARN of our cluster, and then giving it the SQL that we just generated from passing in this string over here. Now I'm just going to return the response now. And then we're going to run this guy. So if all worked well here, this should fail not with a syntax error, but with a permission error because we don't have permissions to get this secret ARN. So let's test this out really quick. So test, and they changed the UI here. So this looks a little different than what I'm used to. Foobar. That, and click on deploy. And then click on test. So let's see if this worked. Yeah, so access denied exception. When calling execute statement, scroll to the right, it's giving us operation is not authorized to perform execute statement on resource blah, blah, blah. Okay, so what this is saying is that we are missing this permission. Now, since we're using the RDS data API, it requires a very explicit permission, which is this one, execute statement. So what we need to do now, we didn't fail on the secrets part. We actually failed on the step prior to that, but I'm going to actually go and solve both of them at once, just so that I don't have to go back and forth all the time. So I'm going to open up a new tab here just so we can go to the IAM section really quick. So I'm going to type in IAM at the top, and we're going to go ahead and create a role that has all the permissions that we need. So we're in the IAM section. We're going to go to roles now on the left-hand side, and we're going to go ahead and click on create role. And we are a Lambda function. So we're going to click on next. And it's going to load up some default policies here. So we need, conveniently for us, there's two policies that exist that are going to give us the access or give us the permissions that we need. So the first one is the RDS one that we just saw. And it's this one here, RDS data full access. And if you expand this guy, you can see like you're giving a whole bunch of different permissions here. Now it's giving you access to secrets manager as well with this permission set, which is very convenient for us because when you're using the execute query in that Lambda function, it's going to need access to secrets manager. So it's convenient that this default policy also gives you all of these permissions as well. So pretty cool that it kind of saves you a headache there. keep in mind that you're also giving access to all of these other permissions as well. And here's the one that we were missing, RDS data execute statement. So this definitely has what we needed. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this checkbox here. Make sure you do that or else this isn't going to work. I often make this mistake and have to kind of tear my hair out trying to figure out what I did wrong. So make sure you tick that box. Go ahead and click on next. We're not going to use tags here, so click on review. And let's just name this Aurora Lambda role. Yeah, Aurora Lambda role. That's good enough for me. It's going to have this policy, and that looks good. And I think we actually need to add one more. It needs the basic execution role. So let me actually just do that really quick. So go back here, type in Lambda. And yeah, there we go. Lambda basic execution role. You need that one as well. So you can either do this as part of the previous step just by selecting both or by doing it in two separate additions like I just did. But regardless, you need to have your role at the end of the day have Amazon RDS full data access and AWS Lambda basic execution role. Now I would suggest that you don't kind of give all the permissions here. If this is a production application, it's arguably just not a good idea to give all these permissions away. You want to use the least privilege model, but since we're trying to be as quick as possible here, I'm not going to mess with this stuff. So now that we have the correct role created, let's go back to Lambda and give our serverless function the correct role. So we're not going to mess with the code. We're going to leave all this stuff as is, and this automatically saves, so nothing to worry about here. We're going to go to configuration here. And in the configuration section, where is it now? Yes, so it's under permissions. So go ahead and click on permissions and execution role. So this was the default one that Lambda created for us. We don't want to use that. We want to use the role that we just created that has the right permission. So go ahead and click on edit, and it allows you to change the role down here. And as you can see with the autocomplete, it suggests the role that we have. And also note, if you're not seeing your role here in the autocomplete, it's probably because you don't have that Lambda basic execution role attached to your role. So make sure you have that or it's not going to show up here. So I'm going to click on that. And while I'm here, I'm just going to adjust this timeout just in case. You never know if this query takes too long because 3 seconds is kind of short. I'm going to go ahead and click on save now. And we're going to go back to our code section. And I'm just going to go ahead and try to click on test again. And hopefully, if everything worked, we should be seeing our response spit out. So let's try that and see what happened. And there you go. So we got a response back, which is perfect. So if you take a look here, this is a big JSON object that has a bunch of stuff that we don't care about. But embedded in the records key is our data. So we only have 2 records. We have our customer ID, which is 1, and our string value John Doe here. So there's unfortunately a little bit of parsing that you need to do to extract the data. And from what I can tell, it doesn't show you the header names, but you can very easily extract your data with a simple parsing function. If you want to extract the records out here, like I'll just show you really quick. So you can just say like return response records, and then you can start extracting your data this way. Just as a quick little demo of how this might work. And you should see this gets this gets simplified. So yeah, now we have this stuff and we can just iterate over this and construct instances of our returned objects. So if you enjoyed this video, check out the one on the right here for more about Lambda functions. And as always, please don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks so much, guys, and I'll see you next time.